Well, fuck. Hey, what's up guys, my name is David, also known as TystEld, and today I wanted to talk about my favorite character in Borderlands 3, Amara. Now, as you can see from the background footage, I've been playing a little bit of the Maliwan takedown, as I tend to do when I have a little bit of spare time, and I'm using the melee punch ball. It's called Phase Flare, I know, but it's the melee punch ball. So what I wanted to talk about specifically with Amara is her strength as a character, the problem with Borderlands balancing, and also Amara's actual narrative character. All of these are kind of problems for not only the character itself, but for Borderlands 3 as a game. Now, let me explain. So first of all, we have the strength of Amara's abilities. If you ask me, just talking about creatively, Grasp is not an interesting ability. We already had Maya in Borderlands 3, and well, we all want to play the Borderlands 2 Vault Hunters in these new settings. We don't want to play them through another character. When you release 3 skill trees for a character, each one should be unique compared to other abilities from the past, and all the characters are a little guilty of this, but since we're talking about Amara, I have to bring it up. Beyond that, the actual strength of her abilities also have to do with annoyance. Now, annoyance are its own problem that I'll talk about later, but going through the base abilities one by one. First of all, we have Face Slam. Now, Face Slam in of itself is a fairly creative ability, but when paired with annoyance, the power scaling gets a little ridiculous. There are multiple annoyance that allow for 200 to 300% melee or weapon damage after using Face Slam. Now, to some extent this makes sense. Using Face Slam, you kind of put yourself in the middle of danger, so having a large amount of damage to get yourself out of danger makes sense. But also, the entire tree is based around being a tank. Not that that means anything late game, because the tank stats don't do anything, but you would think that the annoyance, or at least the skill itself, would allow you to survive easier if you're putting yourself in the middle of danger by using it, but no. And it's not even Amara's highest damage skill. This, when it comes down to it, is kind of like the baby skill. It's not very high damage, and it's not very interesting to use in my opinion. It would be far more interesting with a melee build though. Then we have Phase Cast. Phase Cast is the ability that I was most excited about when Amara was coming out, because of an ability called Deliverance within the Phase Cast tree that sends little elemental projectiles to other enemies, and that just sounds really cool. Like, the idea of spreading elemental damage throughout an enemy team sounds awesome. First of all, it didn't work for like half a year after release. Deliverance did not get fixed for the longest time, and therefore it never got used. Second of all, there's another part of Phase Cast called Reverberation, which is the one you'll usually use if you're going down the Phase Cast tree, which increases damage based on how many enemies it passes through. And this thing, base damage wise, does less than Phase Slam, but it's so easy to get multiple enemies into Phase Cast's line that it racks up damage really quickly. It is, out of the base abilities, probably the strongest. Don't quote me on that, I haven't actually done the math, but if you were to ask me, it is the strongest base damage wise. And then we have the phase grasp tree. As I said before, I don't really like the phase grasp tree. There's one skill that I think is interesting, but that skill is Ties That Bind, which is a cool thought. What it does is it links the target of your ability to enemies around it, and all of them share 35% of the damage dealt to each other. Which, again, really cool thought. Very overpowered. Especially with guns like the Brainstormer. Ties That Bind gets a little fucking ridiculous. Ties That Bind is easily the actual strongest base ability in the game, period. No questions asked. Base ability wise, Ties That Bind beats everything in DPS. Now, moving outside of base skills, we have the ability Phase Flare, and oh my god, this ability is so broken. It is ludicrous how much damage this thing does. Very seriously, it's so easy to just get Phase Flare by itself, spec into a full melee tree, and one-shot enemies. And I'm not just talking about base enemies. If you build right, base Phase Flare, not even any of its augments, can one-shot Trons. And I know these days it isn't that terribly hard to one-shot Trons, but it's one ability. One ability cast. Gearbox, that is insane! It is by far the strongest skill in the game since its release, and it has not been nerfed to my knowledge. Not to mention, you can use the ability, the augment Glow Up, which is basically a healing version, which also reses allies if you throw it at them, and its damage is still stupid high. Again, if you run a full melee build, you usually don't have to worry about damage, even if you're running the support version of this ability. And that isn't even to mention what I think is the strongest version, Light Fantastic. Now, Light Fantastic is the ability that you're seeing me use throughout this gameplay. It is so strong. What it does is you throw it out like normal, you can't punch it, but what it does is it goes to the enemy that you last damaged. If you use a Dark Army with this ability, it is basically automatically zooming around and hitting enemies. You don't even technically have to fire. On top of this, it gains damage whenever it kills an enemy. Rather, when you kill an enemy. Which means you thought that you could punch enemies to death with just base Phase Flare. Light Fantastic, you'll see it by the end of this video. I tactically one-shot all of the different phases of Wotan. There are a couple exceptions to that, but I'm sure it's probably because of my suboptimal build. Because if I'm going to be honest, my build is not super meta. I've never tried to make it super duper meta. Moving on from that wild tangent, we have already established that Amara is super strong. If you do not believe me, go ahead and play Borderlands 3. Amara's skills are insane. Zane is probably the most actually balanced character in the game. Even if Moze and Flak are in rather good places themselves, Amara is just crazy. You can one-shot the biggest raid boss in the game with Amara. But that's not what we're talking about anymore. The next thing I need to talk about that is a problem with Amara, well, really a problem caused by Amara, is the balancing of weapons around the characters rather than the characters being balanced around the weapons. This is a problem because you have, sure, a bazillion guns in Borderlands 3. But if you were to balance all of the characters' stats around those guns, you only have 4 characters to balance. That isn't that hard comparatively. But every time a gun gets nerfed, rather than a character being nerfed, what that means is another character can no longer use that weapon. For example, let's say that Amara... Actually, no, I have a real example. The face puncher. It does melee damage whenever you fire it. Its pellets do melee damage. Instantly, you know that this gun was going to be strong on Amara. And it was. It still is. It recently got nerfed because of Amara. Amara was too strong with it. And you want to know what happened? Zane can no longer use it. I mean, sure, Zane can use it in lower levels of Mayhem, but we're talking Mayhem 11, the highest rank of Mayhem, the end game. Zane can no longer do a melee build if he wants to. And that wouldn't be a huge problem if the one thing that they had been championing from the beginning of Borderlands release is build diversity. If Zane can't pull off a melee build, then you've got a little less build diversity than you had before. And this isn't even talking about the Seeing Dead mod for Zane, which Zane basically has to use, but you're locking your other characters out of using different weapons, shields, artifacts, because one character is super strong with them. Now, if we change that, and say nerf Amara, and whatever is making the face puncher super strong with Amara on Amara, then you still have melee builds for all the other characters, and you just bring Amara down as here. And yes, that might cause problems for certain Amara builds, but for the overall health of the game, it is a better option. I have no idea what the balancing team is thinking when they do stuff like this, and if you want to know more about the problems with the Borderlands 3 balancing, I highly recommend taking a look at Cruddy Borderlands Theories on Tumblr. He's a personal friend of mine and is super invested into this game, and he breaks down everything from lore to theories and the balance and health of the game much better than I ever could. Now for our last topic is a personal gripe of mine, and one that only makes Amara a worse character in my eyes. Note, I am an Amara main. I love Amara. But this is a problem because it just makes me want to hate Amara so much. Amara is a bitch. Amara is so rude. In almost every DLC, in the main game, she's just so full of herself and cocky and arrogant. It's a wonder that she ever had fans as the Tiger of Partali. Like, she is supposed to be a superhero. And to be a superhero, you usually have to be well liked. Because if you're not well liked, you're just a vigilante. So, Amara being a superhero, and even being shown to have fans, is just the most confusing thing to me. How is she ever liked? She's so self-absorbed, and so rude to random civilians. Like, hell, she barely cares when random Pandoran citizens just blow up in front of her. She doesn't give a rat's ass. There's nothing about Amara that yells superhero. She's like a worse Tony Stark. just self-absorbed, doesn't care about other people, just only cares about her own strength, and it's terrible. It's so terrible. I stopped listening to Amara's voice lines because it's just Amara ranting. Not even ranting. It's Amara boasting about herself. Constantly. Gearbox, what the fuck is a hero in your eyes? She's not supposed to be Handsome Jack. She's supposed to be an actual superhero, Gearbox. What is that? Anyways, the whole point of this video is I've been playing Amara since release of the game, and I really enjoy her playstyle. I enjoy her abilities. I think there are some super cool ideas that maybe should have been given to other characters, but there are some really cool ideas that Gearbox executed for Amara. The problem being that these days, whenever I hear about balance issues, it always goes back to Amara. It's always Amara. That's the problem. Either a weapon got nerfed because of Amara, or a new weapon got released, so of course Amara's doing the most damage. Open up the new DLC, oh look, Amara's being a bitch, but it doesn't help. I really want Gearbox to take a good look at their game, a good look at their balance, and give the other Vault Hunters some love. Like, I am an Amara main, through and through, but I've been playing a lot of Moes and Black recently, because after a while, it just got frustrating to be playing the character that you know will win in every scenario. It barely matters what you build on Amara. In a looter shooter, like, having build diversity is good. And I guess Amara technically champions that, but it doesn't matter what I build. I can build anything on her, throw anything together, and it will just work. And that honestly takes some of the fun out of the game. I want to be like Zane and have to freeze enemies. Using a Frozen Heart Shield on Zane is super fun because of the synergies. Amara barely has synergies like that, or when she does, it basically ends in a dead boss in under 2 seconds. I want to have fun with this character, but it's really hard to do so when it's either you do an infinite amount of damage, a literal game-breaking amount of damage, or you do like damage. It's good enough, it's comparable to other Vault Hunters, but it's not fun. I know this wasn't my usual sort of video, and I don't usually talk about the balance of games that frequently because obviously I'm not a part of Gearbox. But if you like the video, hit that like button, subscribe if you want to, comment your thoughts about other characters, the balancing problems of Borderlands, or even just like your favorite line from one of the characters, and I guarantee it's going to be from Zane. I want to see what other people think about the health of Borderlands 3. With that being said, have a nice day, guys. Talk to you guys later.